guys, Caleb Southerland here with City Team, talking on disciple-making movements with Mike Turner. He is a disciple-making catalyst here in Dallas, so thanks for being a part of this.
Absolutely.
Just kind of chatting a little bit. I want to ask you, Mike, a little bit about your journey into DMM. Not necessarily the timeline, but more just kind of the philosophy of why in your church experience and what kind of moved you over into believing this. So.
Right. I mean, for me, the biggest thing growing up was negativity towards church culture. A lot of why I walked away when I was a teenager from the gospel was that experience. So for me, being able to put non-believers, lost people in a situation where they get to explore Jesus, discover him without the negativity that surrounded that, really opened up a lot of how to do ministry for me in a non-church context.
Cool. Well, and one of the things, so I met Mike in a seminary class where we were kind of talking, I think, just about church planting and where we were going with it. And I kind of shared the vision and ideology of DMM. And Mike came up to me afterwards and said, hey, can we meet? Can we talk? So talk a little bit about just your journey even in that and what happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a 3-year journey of just kind of learning what it is, walking away from it, walking back in. Probably the biggest thing for me was giving myself tools of how to connect the gospel to culture, how to connect it with where people are at and inviting them to study Jesus. And so I think that's kind of my launching pad for DMM is that I believe making disciples is a key component of the gospel call on our lives. And for me, I've always been confused with the whole evangelism thing where we're going to stand on a street corner or have our elevator pitches, but whenever we start doing life with people like Jesus did, where you're inviting people to do 2, 3, 4 years relationally, it takes a while. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of bad days, good days, but you're in it for that person. So it's no longer like soul winning, but you're looking at that person and looking at value and dignity as God sees them.
Yeah, that's really good. So tell me this, a little bit of change. You kind of live in two worlds. You're working in traditional church world and you're doing DMM. How does that work? How does it coexist? Tough question.
Yeah. Probably the biggest overlap is, so in churches, that's where we get to experience the majority of Christians in every week, every day. And so beginning to train people by discipling them with the values of DMM, with the values of how to engage culture. And then once you have that 6 months, a year where you've invested in them in the church world relationally, okay, this is different. Why is this different? When I asked you to disciple me or you asked to disciple me, I was expecting to go through this book and through that, and there wasn't the intentionality in the relationship. And then you start explaining what DMM is and unpacking that, well, I believe in discipling to the cross and from the cross, not. And so I want to do this with all people. And so I see guys like Cameron, who, when I started sharing that vision with him, he's now going to be doing his internship at Dallas Theological Seminary under me, where we're going to be learning how to blend those two worlds even more.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So last question. You're really going after millennials in Dallas. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about maybe a story of kind of something that's cool that's happened, a group that started, or what you're doing in forming teams and what some of that looks like.
Right. A cool story. So this past fall of September 2016, I was invited to be a speaker at this conference talking about why millennials are disillusioned with the local church. And there were 200 or 300 pastors, churches represented in this. And so I went to a place on Greenville Avenue here in Dallas called Dallas Beer Kitchen and just started working through what I wanted to talk about. And the owner of the bar, who I had a relationship with for the last 6-7 months, came up to me, saw my notebook, saw my computer, and asked me what I was working on. And so just kind of told him a little bit about the story of how I got involved with being involved with this conference and all that. And he started sitting down and sharing with me his story of why he is disillusioned with the local church and different experiences he's had. And within 30 minutes, there were 10 other guys sitting at our table, all sharing their stories. And I began to see not just this topic as something I was passionate about from experience, but that the millennial generation in Dallas, Texas, most of them have grown up in conservative culture. Most of them have grown up going to church 3 or 4 times a week. And have stepped away from the faith. And a lot of it is due to baggage and negativity that they've experienced. And I love the church. I work for a local church now and all that. But a lot of people aren't willing to give Jesus a chance because they're not willing to walk through the church doors. And so that story just really opened up to me where Dallas, where the millennial generation is, that we see people each and every day who have this baggage and these scars, and they're not even willing to invite Jesus into that space because of that baggage. And so I feel if you can present who Jesus is in a non-threatening way, then you'll start seeing disciples made in the millennial generation here.
That's awesome. So, Mike, thanks for coming on, being part of it. I think one of the things that's huge is hearing how many people are a part of DMM. So it's not just a select group of people. It really is, whether you're on staff at a church and doing it, trying to reach millennials. We're learning more and more that this isn't just what's happening in missions around the world. It's actually happening in cities here in the U.S. And so I love what's happening in Dallas. I love what's happening with you. So what would you, if somebody's on their journey of maybe thinking about DMM, what would you encourage them to do?
Sit down and talk to Caleb Southerland about it.
No. I think a lot of it, though, is
It's been a huge part of my journey. No, I mean, for me, it's sitting down and really spending time in the Gospels and seeing what Jesus did. I'm not saying it's the only way to connect with people and culture and to make disciples, but Jesus thought there was something inherently valuable about spending 3 years with 12 dudes that the day that he died, all of them fled and ran away. They weren't committed to this. And yet he still thought this was the way that I'm going to reach the world, is hang out with these 12 guys for 3 years who aren't going to get it repeatedly until after he resurrected. And so for me, like, that was the biggest transition, is I could give you a lot of theological truths and whatnot, but Jesus, for him, he thought it was most valuable to spend 3 years with 12 guys.
Yeah. So I think a lot of what we were talking about is jump in, read the gospel narratives, see what Jesus does, but then also connect with somebody and have good dialogue, have good conversations, have somebody that's going to push back on you. And so we want to invite you. That's what City Team is a part of, and that's what we're doing. And so we'd encourage you to go to our website, follow up with us, and join kind of some other community of people just trying to figure out how to do this. So thank you.